Man, it's been a while since I last released a video. Part of it is because I haven't pulled for the latest units, so there's not much content I can make there. I know Casteress and Blade work well together. I don't have Casteress, and so I can't really use her in any of the endgame modes. I know there's an event that lets you borrow a Casteress, but that event is really easy. So, Pure Fiction is here, and I don't see many people talking about it, so I don't know how many people care. Blade is able to do 40k on both sides. I would say the first half is easier. The second half takes a bit more RNG because of the AoE attacks, so if your teammates aren't bulky enough, they might die. If you're new here, I am a free-to-play Blade main who tries to do a showcase using Blade in every single endgame rotation that comes out, just to give people an idea of how Blade is still performing. I started my channel a year ago doing Blade 0 cycles, and then it got to a point where 0 cycles not possible, so I just go for the best clear I can get. Pure Fiction got a lot easier after Jade's release, and so you could nitpick this and say this is a Jade showcase instead of a Blade showcase, but I would argue that Blade and Jade, their synergy is really good, that you could still consider this somewhat a Blade showcase. If we're talking about the second half, I would say it's more of a Jade showcase. Although, I would also say if you had the Herda, just use the Herda on the second half because she can 0 cycle that. And she can 0 cycle that in her sleep. So the fact that Blade can full clear the second half and do it while off element is quite nice. So yeah, this is kind of the team that I have going for Pure Fiction, at least this time around. One of Blade's selling points, but it could also be a drawback, is Blade's teams aren't set in stone. There's no best in slot team. It's really hard for me to answer a question if someone asks me what is Blade's best team, because it varies depending on the content. The Apocalyptic Shadow 2 cycles ago, the Adventurine boss, the best teammate for Blade on that fight, at least for me, was Fei Xiao. And so a Blade Fei Xiao team was my highest performing team, and I was able to get a 3800 clear with that team. But this current Apocalyptic Shadow, I would say Blade's best team is probably some hyper carry team with Blade, Ranmei, Sunday, and then another support of your choice. But I don't have Sunday, unfortunately, so I can't say for certain. So like if you're running Blade with Fei Xiao, you obviously run Robin. If you're running Blade Hyper Carry, you don't want to run Robin because half of her buffs are useless on Blade. And so instead you would probably go for Tribbie, you'd probably go for Sunday. But if you're in Pure Fiction, which is an AoE game mode, I think you're pretty much gonna stick with Jade, just because Jade is the queen of Pure Fiction. And then I would say Tribbie is also an insanely good unit in Pure Fiction because she can hold the dance. She can get a bunch of ultimates off because there's AoE enemies, which means there's always going to be AoE attacks. She's going to get a lot of energy, her ult's always going to be up. And Tribbie herself does AoE damage. And then also because Blade and Jade, their synergy excels, especially with the more enemies you face. Just because Blade's follow-up attack can hit all the enemies, and in Pure Fiction there's always going to be 5 enemies. Blade's basic attack hits 3 enemies, his ultimate hits 3. So anytime you do a basic or an ultimate into a follow-up attack, that's 3 plus 5. And then because you hit 8 enemies with those 2 attacks, Jade gets a guaranteed follow-up attack. Because Jade follow-up attacks every 8 stacks, Blade's 3 plus 5 gives you 8 stacks. And also, if you weren't aware, Jade marking Blade as debt collector makes it so every time Blade attacks, he drains his health one more time, meaning Blade himself can get more stacks quickly, and then he can launch more follow-up attacks, which then helps Jade get more follow-up attacks of her own. And then with Bronya, that's the interesting one because your Bronya is speed tuned to Blade's final speed, so not his initial speed. Here I have Blade on 124 base speed on Longevous Disciple, so no Eagle shenanigans where he's gonna change his action value. Longevous Disciple, constant 124 base speed. But Jade is going to give him 30 speed, putting him at 154. And then Bronya's E2 is going to give him another 30 speed, shooting him up to 184 speed. And so your Bronya could technically be at around 180 speed and this team will work. The thing is, my Bronya, I had her initially at 177 speed, but she kept dying, so I had to switch her to bulkier gear. Unfortunately, that means I had to lose a bunch of speed because my bulkier gear did not have as much speed, but it is what it is. You work with what you have. And so my current Bronya in this team is at 168 speed. I would say Jade's E1 is nice to have, but not necessary. Tribbie's E1 is quite necessary in my opinion. If you want to have a comfortable time clearing content, then Tribbie's E1 is quite necessary to get. Necessary is not the right word. Just like how I get a lot of hate for using must pull, even though like when I say must pull, I'm just saying like that's the value of it. I'm not saying everyone has to pull Tribbie, but I'm saying like she should be treated at the tier of a character that will fundamentally change how you approach the game, just because your characters will deal that much more damage. Like having a Tribbie on your account versus not having a Tribbie on your account, it's very, very different. I wouldn't be able to do a lot of what I do if I didn't have Tribbie. And the same goes with Robin. Like those two characters, they're must pull in the sense that they change your account. But they're not must pull in the sense that you can't clear without them. Like you could obviously clear without them. It's just, it's going to be a lot different. Your clears are going to look way different. And also they're going to look slower unless you have crazy eidolons on your other units. Or if you have cracked out gear. Like if you have a Zila that's at like 100 crit rate, 300 crit damage, 4k attack, then obviously yeah, you don't need Tribbie or Robin, but like who realistically has that good of a Zila? As for Blade, you don't really need his eidolons light cone wise. I'm not sure, just because I use his light cone to hit 100% crit rate. I really don't want to get screwed over with crit, and so I want to be like, his light cone gives a bunch of crit rate, and I love the consistency it gives you. Bronya, you kind of want her E1. Skill points won't work out if you don't have her E1. And then you also kind of want her light cone, or at least one skill point generating light cone on this team. Tribbie is going to be on Dance Dance Dance. So Bronya, her light cone is nice to have. This team eats up skill points quite quickly. You might think that skill points aren't an issue because you have Jade and Tribbie who are skill point positive, but they're really slow. And with the speed cycling of Blade and Bronya, you eat through a lot of skill points. So yeah, as many skill point generators as you can get is nice. So Bronya's light cone is nice to have. Bronya's Eidolon 2 is also nice to have. It's not necessary, but then if you don't have Bronya's E2, Blade will need a lot more speed, or you drop Bronya's speed down. Like in this case, if I had Bronya E1 and my Blade and Jade would put Blade at 154 speed, then I would put my Bronya around 150, 151. And then for the second half fight, it can get annoying because of the constant AoE attacks. So the initial part, you just want to dodge Jade. Like, Jade should not get hit. She needs to be as healthy as possible going into the final wave, because the summons, they do AoE attacks, and so Jade is going to get hit for sure. And then your other characters just need to be tanky and they won't die. Tribbie and Blade should pretty much never die just because of how much HP they have in their builds. Bronya is one of the ones who could potentially die off if she gets targeted too many times. Jade obviously, but if Jade gets hit early, you reset. Like, there's no question. If Jade gets targeted and she loses half her health before you even get to the third fight, then you just reset. There's no point playing it out. At least Unless your gear is super cracked and you can just one-shot the boss. But for me, because I'm working with free-to-play units and free-to-play builds, I cannot one-shot the boss, and so I need my Jade to be as healthy as possible. And then with Bronya, I want her to have as much health as possible, so I actually don't care too much about her energy regen. I'm just gonna give her full-on tank stats for her planar ornaments. Screw the energy. Her light cone gives her energy, so if you do need energy, that's where you get it from. And then also, her ultimate is like nice, but it's not as much of a game changer as Tribbie's ultimate. So to be honest, if you don't have it up 100% uptime, it's fine. Like, it doesn't matter that much. If you're looking for other fun Blade teams, you could always sub out Bronya for Sunday, and that could actually be better. I don't have Sunday though, so like, I'm using Bronya because I don't have Sunday. You could also use Castress instead of Jade, but I don't have Castress, so I don't actually know how well that works in practice. In theory, it's fine. In practice, I don't know, because I don't have them. You could also run Sparkle. You could do Sparkle Bronya, and that's the famous unlimited blade works, where you just have Blade go over and over and over again. I think Blade's best selling point is his flexibility with teams. He can work with a bunch of units, and he doesn't have like a dedicated support, which means a lot of the supports can work for him and relatively equally, because there's no like Farina. If there was a Farina in the game, that would be his best in slot, and then that's his cookie cutter support. It's like, if you run Farina in every team, you can with Blade, but we don't have one, so Tribbie is like the closest thing, but even Tribbie isn't perfect synergy with Blade. It's just the best one of the characters we currently have, and Sunday also isn't perfect synergy with Blade. It's just the best one of the options we have, and so it's like relatively easy to get away with replacing them. Like, you could have RMC instead of Bronya or Sunday. You could have Robin or Ron May instead of Tribbie, and you can have a sub DPS like Jade. You could have a main DPS like Castress, or you could go hyper carry and just fill out the rest of the team with supports, or you could go for a sustain. Hyacinth might be good here too as a 4th character. She's releasing soon. But also because of his flexibility and the fact that he doesn't have one best team, that could be a drawback, because if you don't have a built out account like me, like I've been a day 1 player, so I have a lot of characters, but if you don't have one, you will never be able to run his optimal team for a given scenario, because you won't have all the options. And so that's where I think the value of someone like Firefly comes in, because you can just run the same 4 units with Firefly in every single rotation and you'll be fine. Whereas with Blade, depending on the enemies you face, his teammates kind of change. And then if you're a sweat like me, you have multiple gear sets for Blade. So I have Blade on an Eagle set, I have Blade on a Speed Longevis, I have Blade on a Slow Longevis, I have Blade on a Quantum set for the high defense break teams. I think the only set I don't have for Blade is a break set, just because I think Super Blade is a troll. But, you know, prove me wrong. Show me a really, really good Super Blade clear, and I'll shut up.